We usually think of translation files as, well, the easy part of software development. You get a list of English strings, you send it out, they come back in French or German, and, you're done. It's just a new skin.
That's the common assumption, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just surface-level UI work.
But today, we're looking at a document that just proves that assumption is dead wrong. We have this technical localization file. It's Czech translations localization-1.pdf. And it's for an accounting system, something like TurboCASH or osFinancials. And as we went through this, it became obvious pretty fast that this is not a dictionary.
No, not at all. It's a map. It's a map of a very specific, very rigid legal reality.
It really is. I mean, when you're localizing financial software for the Czech Republic, you aren't just swapping invoice for factura.
Right. You are hard-coding an entire nation's bureaucratic infrastructure into the logic of your app.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to try and decode the Czech logic that's, hidden in these strings. We're talking about the mandatory state-enforced backbone of their accounting standards, the absolute labyrinth of their VAT system, or DPH.
DPH, right.
And we're even going to do a little software archaeology on some bizarre legacy code that, if you translated it incorrectly, it could actually land a user in serious trouble.
It's a perfect case study. It shows how code has to bend to comply with the law.
Let's just jump right into the architecture. The first thing that hits you in this document, it's not the words, it's the structure they imply. There's a reference to something called the Smirna Účtová osnova. Now, if you're familiar with, say, US or UK accounting, you're used to some flexibility. You can pretty much number your expense accounts however you want.
Right, as long as the P&L works out. In the Anglo-American model, the chart of accounts is, it's largely a suggestion, a business decision. In the Czech Republic, it is the law. Smirna Účtová osnova translates to the standard chart of accounts.
So if I'm a developer building this software, I can't just give the user a blank slate.
Absolutely not. The system has to come preloaded with a specific hierarchy. The source material highlights these account classes from 0 to 9, and this is totally non-negotiable.
So class 0 is long-term assets, class 1 is inventory.
Or SCLAD, as the file translates it.
Right, SCLAD. And that's a good example, isn't it? That word literally means warehouse, but in the accounting context, it's a very specific asset class.
Exactly. And this structure, the Smirna Účtová osnova, it ensures comparability. Any accountant in the country can look at any company's hlavní kniha, their general ledger, and know exactly what account 518 is without asking a single question.
Let's pause on that term, hlavní kniha. It translates to main book.
Yeah. It feels almost medieval, doesn't it, the main book?
Yeah.
But in the Czech context, the hlavní kniha is the source of all truth.
But this is where the software challenge gets interesting. The file says that while the skeleton is mandatory, there's room for synthetic and analytical accounts.
And that's the flexibility inside the cage. The government defines the class, the one-digit number, and the group, the two-digit one. But the company, they get to define the synthetic account, which is 3 digits, and the analytical account, which can be, 4 or 5 or 6 digits long.
So the developer has to build a system that enforces the government's rules at the top, but allows total freedom at the bottom.
Precisely. And crucially, the software has to be able to roll up all those custom analytical accounts into the correct mandatory synthetic account for reporting. If your code breaks that link, your financial statements are just invalid.
Which brings us to probably the biggest technical headache in this document, the clash of standards. The source lists applicable accounting standards, and it flags this conflict between Czech GAAP and IFRS.
This is the nightmare scenario for any multinational corporation. If you're a Czech company on a stock exchange, you have to report to shareholders using IFRS international standards.
Which is normal, standard practice globally.
Right. But, and this is a huge but, the Czech tax authority, they do not care about IFRS. The corporate income tax base must be calculated according to local Czech accounting legislation.
So you have two different rule books describing the same money.
Yes. And they often disagree on things like how to recognize revenue or depreciate an asset.
So from a software perspective, you can't just have one reporting engine. You need some kind of bridge mechanism.
You need a reconciliation engine. The software has to maintain the hlavní kniha in a way that satisfies the local tax inspector, while at the same time, it has to be able to output a completely different set of numbers for international shareholders.
Wow.
The file alludes to this. It has specific strings about tax adjustments and non-tax deductible expenses.
So it's not just translating words, it's translating entire systems of logic.
Exactly.
And speaking of logic, let's talk about the logic of taking money from people. The tax system,
The DPH.
does Sridhane Adnati, VAT. This seems to be the single most volatile part of the whole file.
Oh, it is. If the chart of accounts is the skeleton, VAT is the nervous system. It touches everything. And the source document, it highlights this critical recent change that shows just how dangerous hard-coding numbers can be.
You're talking about the rate change, January 1st, 2024.
Correct. For years, the Czech Republic had a standard rate, 21%, and two reduced rates,
Sure.
15% and 10%. So developers probably had those hard-coded, reduced rate 1 and reduced rate 2.
The government decided to simplify things, or maybe complicate them.
Yeah, right. They merged the 15 and 10% rates into a single 12% rate.
So if you're a developer who didn't patch your system on New Year's Eve, every single invoice your software generated for food or housing or tap water was legally wrong on January 1st.
Instantly non-compliant. And it's not just about the percentage. The source mentions the zero rate for EU exports, but the real complexity is how these rates flow through the system. And for that, we have to talk about account 343.
Account 343. Yes, this kept popping up everywhere. In a U.S. system, it might have sales tax payable and sales tax receivable as two separate accounts.
In the Czech chart of accounts, account 343 is Grand Central Station for VAT. It handles input VAT, which is what you pay, output VAT, which you collect, and the final settlement with the tax office.
So the net balance of this one single account tells you your entire standing with the government.
Yes, but the software can't just dump a number there. This is where we get into the control statement, the kontrolní hlášení. This was the part of the file that really stood out to me as a heavy, heavy lift for developers.
And this is more than just your standard tax return, right?
Oh, much more. A normal V8 return just says I owe X amount. The kontrolní hlášení, which they brought in to fight tax fraud, it requires the software to generate this huge XML file that lists every single invoice.
Every invoice.
Every single one. With the tax ID of the supplier or the customer, the date, the base amount. The government servers then cross-reference your report with your supplier's report.
So if I claim I paid you VAT and you don't report collecting it,
The system flags it instantly.
it's a panopticon. It's total visibility. So think about the software implications. You need a tax code system. The user selects 12% rate.
Right.
The software has to map that to a calculation. Then it maps the result to account 343 for the general ledger. But at the same time, it has to tag that transaction with a specific line item code for the kontrolní hlášení.
And if any link in that chain breaks, if the XML fails validation, the user cannot file their taxes.
And their business just stops.
Which is why we see such aggressive error messages in the file. We'll get to those. But first, we have to talk about the ghosts in the machine.
The legacy themes. This was my favorite part of the document just because it's so unexpected in a dry financial file.
It's a real lesson in software archaeology.
So deep in the translation strings, around ID 397, we find this list of themes. And the names are just wild. We have Christian, Jewish, Islamic, Scottish, Egypt, wildlife, and space.
And the explicit instruction in the file is, do not translate these into Czech.
Which really begs the question, what on earth is a Jewish theme doing in accounting software? Does it calculate interest differently or something?
No, and that's the danger. As the commentary in the file explains, these are just artifacts from old versions of TurboCASH, like versions 3 and 4. They were just skins. Background wallpapers. Egypt gave you pyramids. Scottish probably gave you some plaid.
Okay, so why is translating them so dangerous?
Well, imagine you're a Czech accountant. You open a drop-down menu. If you see the Czech word for Jewish, Idovsky, or Islamic, Islamsky.
You're not thinking about wallpapers.
Not in a financial context, no. You might think these refer to specific tax rules, or maybe, I don't know, accounting standards for religious charities.
Right. You might think, oh, my client is a church, I should select the Christian setting.
Exactly. And suddenly you've changed the UI setting, thinking it's a functional one. By keeping the words in English, Jewish, Scottish, it signals to the user, this is a computer thing. This is a file name. This is not a Czech legal term.
It's basically a do not touch sign written in a foreign language.
Precisely. It's a brilliant, low-tech solution to a very high-risk localization problem. It separates the business logic from the interface artifacts.
It says that modern versions have moved on to tema, which is theme, and SVG icons. Much safer.
But those ghosts are still in the code.
Now, speaking of safety, we have to talk about the screaming.
The error messages.
I have never seen a localization file with this much pure anxiety. We have lines 436 and 502. fatal file, error 11, just surrounded by exclamation points.
And line 425, warning, this will seriously affect your set of books.
And my personal favorite, line 426, you have chosen to delete all users. Access control will now be disabled. I mean, why does the software sound like it's having a full-blown panic attack?
Because of the Lavniniha, because of the set of books, the Chetnik V. In a normal app, if you lose some data, it's annoying, right? In this system, data integrity isn't just a technical goal, it's a legal requirement.
The file mentions control integrity, data integrity check a few times.
Right. If the sum of your invoices doesn't match the balance in account 343, or if your control statement XML doesn't match the general ledger, the Futic V is corrupted. You have a fatal error, not just in the software file, but in your legal standing.
So the software is literally screaming at the user to prevent them from destroying their own audit trail.
Exactly. When the software says fatal error, it is trying to save you from a tax audit that will go very, very badly. It's protecting the sanctity of the Lavniniha.
It's interesting you use the word sanctity, because when we step back and look at this whole file, from the rigid structure to the mandatory XML reporting to these screaming errors, it feels less like a tool and more like a straitjacket.
I would call it a necessary cage.
Unpack that for me.
Well, we usually think of software as something that empowers us. Here's a blank page, write a novel. Here's a canvas, go paint. But accounting software like this is the opposite. It's designed to restrict you.
It limits your choices.
It has to. The Czech government says you must report this way. The software takes that abstract law and it turns it into hard constraints. You cannot create an account outside the class structure. You cannot file taxes without the tax ID mapping. The localization file is where that rubber meets the road. It's where human language is forced into the binary rigidity of the law.
So the translator who works on this file isn't just translating words, they're actually building the bars of that cage.
They are. If they translate control statement vaguely and the user misses it, the cage breaks. If they translate Scottish as a tax rule, the user walks right into a trap.
It really reframes how you have to look at these technical documents. We started this deep dive asking if a list of words could reveal the skeleton of a nation, and I think we found the answer is a definite yes.
Definitely.
You can see the skeleton in the Smyrna Ustava Osnova, you can see the nervous system in the DPH changes, and you can see the history in those legacy themes.
And this brings up a final thought for everyone listening. We tend to trust the numbers. We think math is math. 2 + 2 is 4 in Prague, just like it is in New York.
Right. Numbers don't lie.
The numbers don't lie, but the labels can. This document proves that the words we wrap around those numbers, whether we call something input VAT or investment, whether we classify it as class 5 or class 6, that determines the reality of that money. You can have the math be perfect, but if the localization is wrong, if the concept is wrong, you're still breaking the law.
The math matches, but the meaning is criminal.
That's the power of the Lavniniha.
That is a heavy thought to end on, but a crucial one for anyone working in this space. Language is infrastructure. A massive thank you to everyone for listening to this deep dive into the hidden gears of Czech accounting. Who knew a PDF of translation strings could hold so much drama?
The devil in the tax man is always in the details.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next deep dive.